I know it's gone for a little while. I was getting a brand new setup and everything together, hoping the audio quality has shot up for you guys. I got a lot of learning to do in terms of editing on audio and all that good happy jazz. We're not going to be too goofy and silly here today because we got a potentially long video ahead of us. So speaking of which, of course, timestamps down in the description below if there's a particular part you're needing to get straight to. Two caveats I want to point out. We're not touching on auxiliaries today, and we're not touching on submarines today. Reason why we're not touching on submarines is that's just kind of all over the place. We have very little control over what equipment we do or don't get for submarines, so I'm just not going to touch on it. Auxiliary is because I want this video to not take forever, so we will do a separate video for auxiliary. And I guess truth be told, a minor caveat, if you will, since this video is of course for newer players, we're going to be discussing weapons that are largely accessible to newer players. We're not really going to be discussing, you know, PR weapons or anything like that all that much. We're gonna try to avoid that for the most part, because if you're at the point that you're getting PR guns, I would hope you already know what weapons you're putting where. That said, if it isn't obvious with the fact that a destroyer is up front, we're doing destroyers first. As we will have up on the screen for you right about now, you can see that when we're talking in Azure Lane, AP is not a very good ammunition type for destroyers. Regular is not the best either, truth be told. The best ammunition type for across the board for destroyers is going to be high explosive. That said, there is some caveats and things that definitely are going to happen here. So I have two number one picks. They tie out for me because they have two completely different purposes. First things first is, of course, the twin 127mm Mark 12 dual gun. It fires higher explosive. That's good. It gives us a little extra anti-air stats. Not bad. It has very high alpha damage. It has high DPS. It is just a solid all-around, very powerful gun. The purple one of this is still a perfectly fine gun. It doesn't have to be gold, by the way, just so you know. This is the very easy, very strong recommendation to go with when we're talking about destroyer weapons. The other one that is a tie for me is what I like to call the Lucky Blue. Different people might have different names for it, but it's this right here, the blue 76mm AA gun. Why a blue one? And why something with so low damage fire rate? This is basically put a ability proccing build is what this one right here is going to be. Because the thing is, with Z23 here, every time she fires, a 5% chance to proc her first ability. And of course, with every 10 shots, she fires off an all-out assault, again, based off her main guns. So with that one bared in mind, that means the faster you are firing, the faster and more often you are going to proc these types of abilities. So this is a ability proccing build, while this one over here with the 127 is just like raw damage. A third one that comes pretty high on my list but just falls behind the other two is the 100mm. This is what I would like to call a compromise gun. It kind of has a little bit of advantages over the other two. It has slightly higher AA specialty than the 127mm. It has a better fire rate, but not quite as good as good old Lucky Blue does. But that said, it still does fairly decent damage. Biggest drawback of the twin 100mm though would definitely have to be the fact it shoots normal ammunition instead of like HE, but we can tolerate it. It's not a bad gun. It's definitely not a bad gun. Even then though, we're still not done. Destroyers have a crazy number of gun options, which is ironic. So yet another gun option that does exist for our destroyers is this right here, the twin 120mm. This has the highest theoretical DPS of all the DD game guns. It plays similarly to the gold 127mm twin, same damage per shot, but it has a slightly faster reload. But it's purple. The problem is it fires normal shells instead of HE. And that's where the problem comes in. So while this has the highest theoretical, you know, DPS of destroyer guns, it can fall short due to the fact it's not firing HE like the 127 is. But that said, if you don't have enough twin 127s laying around or the other gun options laying around, then the twin 120, perfectly fine, really solid and good option to be rolling with. Now the next type of ship that we're going to touch on is light cruisers. Light cruisers are, basically put, they're just amazing. I don't know. I personally really like light cruisers. Light cruisers are once again best at HE, as we can see on the screen, but they are a good bit better at AP than your destroyers, and they're also a decent bit better at regular ammunition than destroyers as well. But they're just better across the board as far as their ammunition types. But once again, their damage modifier for HE is higher than the other two. So, bit of a trend it seems for the moment. But when we're talking light cruisers, well, since HE is kind of the big deal, there's what's called the Belfast gun. I'm not joking, this thing gets called the Belfast gun a lot. This right here would probably be the #1 light cruiser gun to recommend. It's just damage. It's your raw damage. It just hurts. It has very high theoretical and very high actual DPS. It will just absolutely destroy your enemies. Unless, you know, your enemies are really resistant to high explosive or something like that, who knows. If that is the case, then that's when we're going to want to run some AP. If it's AP that we're wanting to run, then it's going to be this right here, the twin 150mm gun. This right here sometimes gets called a Cleveland gun. It also sometimes is referred to as Tabasco sauce. Don't ask me why on that one, I don't actually know. This is often considered the best choice for AP among your light cruisers, as far as guns that are, like, you know, normally obtainable. The theoretical DPS ranks at the top portion of the chart, along with the Belfast gun above, beating it just slightly. This is an all-around pretty solid gun right here. It can get the job done, and when you need AP instead of HE, there you go. And then last but not least, we of course have to talk about the ability proc builds. You're going to see this as a common trend. They exist. The single 150mm main gun is a great gun to go with when you are wanting a gun that just shoots really, really fast to proc fire rate based abilities. It's basically the same idea as the Lucky Blue that I discussed with destroyers, so I won't go uber in depth into detail when you more or less already know what I'm going to say. Next up is, of course, heavy cruisers. This is where things get a little bit different because, as we can see on screen, it is not as straightforward as far as the way the damage modifiers work for, you know, AP, HE, etc. There's a little bit of a difference there, so if you want, just pause the video for a moment and look that over. Try to memorize that, or just get a screenshot and put it somewhere in your computer if you don't think you can memorize it all that well. We are going to have a little bit of a caveat here. We're going to be talking about a core data gun. To get this weapon, you would have to do hard mode, save up core data, go to the core data shop, and just buy it. This is the best high explosive firing gun in the game for heavy cruisers right now. It just does a lot of damage at a pretty good rate of fire. It is a solid all-around weapon. Highly recommend this one. If you need a strong AP route instead, though, you're going to want to run the twin 203mm main gun. There's a gold version. I do have some, but they're on other ships. But the purple version is still perfectly fine to run. This is your go-to for AP. There's not really much else to be pointed out here or anything too, like, significant or special about this weapon. And then, of course, if you do not want to go doing the whole core data thing, your alternative is going to be this then, the regular 202mm mounted gun. It's basically the poor man's prototype. You're just not going to get quite as much in terms of your performance. And then, of course, we have to answer it. What about a weapon if we are wanting to do ability proc builds? It's going to be the triple 203mm advanced main gun right over here. It has a higher rate of fire to proc your abilities, just lots and lots. There is a weapon with a slightly higher rate of fire, but that's a research gun, and that's why we're not touching on it here today. So those are your 3 different routes on your heavy cruisers. You start talking about your BBs, which of course means not just battleships, truth be told. We're going to be talking about battle cruisers and everything else. Once again, the AP damage modifier is a bit different / weird compared to our, prior ship types. Once again, try to memorize it or just get a screenshot if you need to. I don't know, whatever you need to do there. So anyways, we're going to come over here to Torpedos for these examples. And when we're talking about battleships, the big boy gun is definitely going to be the triple 406mm Mark 6 right over here. This is a high explosive firing gun, and it just brings what you need to the table. Very high damage, very high DPS. Its spread is low, and it even has a pretty reasonable reload at just a little over 20 seconds here. Just an all-around fantastic gun. It will get the job done when you need it. Another pretty great BB gun that we can go with is the 410 mounted gun right here. The reload is significantly faster, but damage per shot is actually less, despite of having only 2 shells versus 3 and at a higher caliber, but it's how it is. That's how it plays out. But this right here is still a perfectly fine option if this is what you're wanting to go with. And then, of course, if we're talking ability proc, i.e. hood, the hood gun, the twin 381mm main gun right here. It's just a really great all-arounder. It's going to get your fire rate as high as you can for those chances at abilities and the like. Although there is a slightly better gun than this, but once again, we're talking about research and the like. So yeah, that's why we're not touching on it here. But these right here are going to be, your big 3 as far as that is concerned. Now we have to talk about secondary guns. We're going to go ahead and put that right here since we're already at a battleship. So our very first one here is, the triple 152mm. This right here is a high explosive firing gun. It's going to do a really good job for destroying like your incoming suicide boats, that sort of thing, which is something that's one of your biggest concerns you have. You can also, if you want to, go with the Belfast gun on your back line for, again, a great option for basically the exact same reasons. Nothing to really discuss here. It's just an alternative. And then if you just want something that's gonna, pew pew really fast, you can go with the twin 152mm right here. It's just, there is definitely a little bit of a difference with this gun when it's on the back line. The spread of this gun is a little big as a light cruiser gun, but as a secondary, it fits a bit better. Despite looking like a twin gun, the shell output is actually 1x4, which this allows you to cover some more area. This gun can kind of be the best choice of maps where shell velocity is what's going to be really important to you. That's just something to bear in mind. Then we have to touch on aircraft carriers. Oh boy. Aircraft carriers, this is going to take a minute. So I have Okamimio over here set up for this discussion of all things. Don't judge me. It's just the one I used. So we're going to go down the line here, and we have a lot to discuss because there's fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers. And we're going to kind of jump all over the place a little bit here potentially, but it's what can you do? You know what I'm saying? So the optimal like kind of loadout is going to be a Hellcat for your fighter. This is an excellent gold fighter, which is balanced weapon choices. It's just really balanced all around. 500-pound bombs can contribute to your airstrike damage and are relevant in PvE. The 500-pound is the heaviest bomb fighters can carry as of now. And if it's for 12.7mm guns, it gives a wide angle of coverage as far as that is concerned too. It's just an all-around really solid option. It just covers all your bases. Solid all-rounder fighter, and it's why it's kind of the biggest recommendation. For dive bombers, it is just all about the SV2C Helldiver. The Helldiver is just an absolutely amazing dive bomber. It's commonly considered the best. It carries a ridiculous 2,000-pound bomb and two quite adequate 500-pound bombs off to the side. As an FYI, bomb damage increase is diminishing after 500 pounds, and this is why fighters are considered good if they could carry the 500-pound bombs. Bomb diversity makes this bomber more adaptable to more enemy armor types, though the effect might be minor, just as a quick little caveat to have pointed out there. But like, seriously, 2,000-pound bomb. 2,000-pound bomb. I think that part just kind of speaks for itself. When we start talking about our torpedo bombers, on the other hand, it's all about the Barracuda. The stereotypical best torpedo bomber. Its reload is very fast at +10, and it does tons of damage. Everything about the Barracuda is just powerful. As far as our other loadouts are going to be concerned, though, we're not going to be going back to the gear menu like that. We're going to try to get through this a little quicker here. There's just so much to discuss when you start talking about aircraft carriers. So for fighters, my second recommendation would instead be what's called the Sea Fang. Now this thing, again, we have two 500-pound bombs. That's great. We're liking that already. We have four 20mm cannons. Double the, the Hellcats, cannons. He can hurt, but the reload is a bit slow. Takeoff and flying speed are both slightly faster than the Hellcats, though, but its health pool is slightly lower than the Hellcat, so it's very interesting. At the end of the day, I guess what I'm basically saying is Hellcat or Sea Fang, it's going to be up to you. There is trade-offs between the both of them, but they're both really solid options to be the fighter for you. From here, we're going to be looking at the BTD-1 Destroyer. I do not sadly have a gold one, but gold ones do exist. Purple is still a pretty fine option though. Intuitively, this should be the quote best end quote bomber. But when it comes to general purpose, it's just a little bit worse than, the SP2C. It carries two 1,600-pound bombs that tend to cluster. So that means if you get a well-timed shot that gets both those bombs to hit something, it can do a lot of damage. It can do a lot of damage, but if it targets like a low health enemy, like a suicide boat instead of, your boss, or, if it just does anything silly, or if the spread was just slightly off since the two bombs like to be close, it can really throw off the damage output in those scenarios, which, yeah, that can kind of stink if that's what ends up happening to you. So it's one of those moments where it's theoretically really good, but in actuality can be a bit on the weak side. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Definitely not bad. If you get both those bombs to hit a boss, for an example, cool beans. That's the sort of moments that you're after. Next up, the next one that we can bring up when we start talking about torpedo bombers, it's going to be the B6N. This is the best normally obtainable torpedo bomber that has the Sakura pattern. And it's just very useful against slow-moving or stationary targets. In other words, bosses or something you can get to stay still with certain abilities that are in the game. It can be a very powerful alternative if the situation is right. But let's be honest, you're probably just going to use the Barracuda, and I'm probably just wasting my breath. But hey. And then last but not least, this is where things get a little bit different and interesting. I could bring up the Zero. I could bring up the Rapu, which are both okay enough options for the fighter, but I am instead going to bring up the Messerschmitt ME-155A. This is a really interesting fighter. This fighter has the fastest launch time among all normally obtainable fighters, and has 3 20mm cannons, 2 13mm cannons. It reloads very quickly for additional takeoffs. It takes off very fast. Basically put, this is an anti-air fighter, which is interesting because you would think, oh, that's the point of a fighter, is to defeat enemy planes, so it's the best fighter in the game, right? We maybe wish to a certain extent. It's just the fact that it doesn't even have so much as a singular bomb to drop on enemy ships. So while, yes, it's a great anti-aircraft airplane, it doesn't really help for your overall damage output on the board itself. And you know, if you kill all enemy ships, any airplanes currently in the air just go away. So prioritizing killing enemy ships as, you know, kind of a big deal. Because of that, the Messerschmitt can feel like it comes up a bit short, but I feel like it still needs to be mentioned because it's just interesting. It's just a unique option in this plane right here. Next up here is the Comet, or also known as the Susui. The Comet is like a lot of Japanese planes. It's light, its specialty is speed. It has a very fast takeoff, and it has the fastest takeoff amongst planes that actually do reasonable, like, bombing damage. Its flying speed is faster than most of its peers as well. So basically put, the bottom line to this plane is, if you want a plane that, you know, reloads quick, takes off quick, flies quick, you know, just gets to the point, drops some bombs, and gets that damage, and it's the Comet. The Comet just... it's, I guess you could say, it's the get in and get back out option of Azur Lane. Now, before we continue on, one other caveat. I'm also going to bring up the Ju-87C dive bomber. This dive bomber has one of the highest theoretical damages of all the dive bombers. It drops a 1,000-pound bomb and 4 100-pound bombs. It just has a very high amount of AoE damage, and if it's paired with Graf Zeppelin, it can actually be a very powerful option. Just, there's better options in a lot of other use scenarios, but that's why I was bringing it up real quick, because it has its use cases. It has them. And then last but not least, for our final torpedo bomber, we're going to bring up the Yaichi, or Aichi, again, I don't know on these pronunciations, B7A. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not even going to try to pronunciate the rest of it. The B7A is the best curve modern torpedo bomber in the game, but it's strict upgrades to the T3 Tenzin and just kind of every way. Pretty strong AA capabilities and whatnot. Just an all-around great airplane. I personally don't have a gold version of it though, only have the purple, and it came from an event. So yeah, that's the thing to bear in mind right there. So with all that thrown out there, are we done? Nope, there's still more to discuss. So now what we're going to talk on is our here. Anti-air, there's a couple different options that do exist. Once again, I don't have the gold version of this, but the top one would be the twin 113mm AA gun in gold. Purple is still fine. This is just simply known as the Roomba. It has a somewhat slow reload, but with its long range, high damage, stereotypical hard-hitting, low rate of fire gold gun, the gun has the highest single round damage and the longest range. So because of that, depending on the scenario, it can just sometimes flat out take out an enemy airplane and then you're done. You don't have to worry about it. Even though its reload is maybe not the best. So take for that what you will. The next best one would be the 105mm AA gun, SKC right here. Now, I do have the gold ones of this, but they're just not for this ship, so that's why it's not here. It plays similarly to the twin 113mm, but slightly less damage with a slightly faster reload, but slightly shorter range. So it's very interchangeable with the twin 113mm. We have all sorts of weapons from there available in terms of our anti-air options, although the quadruple Bofors would probably be one of the next best options to be running if that's what you want to do. So, and then last but not least, we are of course going to touch on torpedoes. So there is, generally speaking, 3 different routes that you can go. There is these that are known as the acoustic guidance. These are magnetic torpedoes, basically put. Magnetic torpedoes are able to follow the enemy, but they also move around slower. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. It depends on what type of enemies that you're against, as far as if these are going to increase your accuracy or actually potentially hurt your accuracy. So try to bear that in mind. If enemies move around really, really fast, there's a chance that you'll just completely miss. If enemies move slowly, or if enemies don't really move at all, then these can be a really great option to get more of your torpedoes to hit that said enemy. That said, though, generally speaking, the 2 different types of torpedoes people are using are the quadruples or the quintuples. The reasons for that being is the quintuple here is just kind of like your all-purpose, all-around kind of torpedo launcher. It doesn't really perform the best at any one thing over the other types that exist, but it doesn't perform at the worst over any of the others at any one thing. So take from that as you will. And the quadruples right here, well, simple. They just do a lot of damage. They don't reload particularly quick compared to some of the others, but they hurt so bad for your opponents. You're just going to hit like a truck. It's as simple as that. You hit like a truck. With all that said, if you like this video, you know what to do. If you didn't like this video, well, hit that button too. Please leave a comment down below if there's anything else you'd like to see me touch on. Thank you so much for watching here today. If things felt a bit off, I am sorry. I feel like I'm trying to potentially get a little sick, but I didn't want to keep waiting additionally as far as getting a new video up. I'm trying to get back into the groove of things here, and this is a topic I've been wanting to touch on for a while. If you feel like I missed anything, of course, put it down in the comment section below. I will try to do a auxiliary guide at some point, and I'm thinking of trying to do a video about Z46 sometime in the near future. Please keep an eye out for those. Thank you so much for the support all you guys give me. If you want to try and help support the channel better, please bear in mind I do have a Patreon, which can of course be found down below. I'll see you guys on Twitch, YouTube, Discord, and Twitter. Bye!
You feel fucking at me.